Hello, welcome. Here we go. Hello, welcome. Hello, good day to all of you joining us from around the world. My name is Marzia Rango. I'm the coordinator of IDAC, the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this webinar today, where we will be presenting and discussing IDAC's newly published report, Alone on the Move and Unseen, spotlighting the urgent needs of unaccompanied and separated children. Just a couple of words about IDAC. IDAC is a global cross-sectoral coalition launched in 2020 to address major gaps in child-specific migration and displacement statistics, included, of course, on unaccompanied and separated children. And to date, it counts more than 50 members globally. It's also jointly led by a secretariat comprising IOM, OECD, UNHCR, Eurostat, and UNICEF as chair. The event is also organized together with our fellow secretariat members, whom I'd like to thank also for their support during the preparation of this publication. And I would also lead donor invaluable support on behalf of migrant and displaced children. So thank you all for joining us today. I see we're still people coming in a bit late. But I wanted to thank especially our speakers who will provide a vital cross-sectoral overview of the situation of unaccompanied and separated children and the role of evidence in upholding their rights. So children on the move without a parent or a caregiver appear along nearly every migration and displacement routes around the world. They are being counted while crossing the borders, found in situations of displacement within their own countries, and yet many more remain largely invisible in the data landscape. And these gaps in evidence inevitably translate into gaps in policy and protection responses. So the report that we're launching today and will present and discuss today with you all explores the latest evidence on unaccompanied and separated children. It details key trends by age, gender, migration status, and route, and outlines how countries can build more responsive, child-focused statistical systems that can really strengthen protection and ensure that these children are seen, that they're supported, and that the rights will dive deeper findings and practices with our distinguished panel of experts, where data specialists and statisticians, child protection officers, civil society, and youth representatives, whom I will be introducing to you shortly. Before we begin, just some brief housekeeping notes. We'll first hear from our panelists and have some time for questions at the end of the event. So we encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the presentations using the chat function. So please state your name, affiliation, and whom the question is addressed to, and we'll make sure to take as many as possible and have some time for Q&A. It's a short webinar, and we have many speakers, so we'll do our best to stick to the time and have time for discussion at the end. And they will be made available on the IDAC YouTube channel. So we'll put a link to the YouTube channel of IDAC at the end. So moving on, first of all, I'm afraid it's a bit of a sad announcement. I'm afraid that Danjan Yu, the Chief of Demographics and Senior Advisor and Monitoring in the Division of Data, Analytics, Planning and Monitoring at UNICEF, will not be able to join us, unfortunately, today. She sends her apologies. She was called into a last-minute meeting with the senior management. She sends her regards, and so I will be reading her opening remarks to you, and then we will introduce our speakers and get into the discussion as well. So from Danjan Yu, she initiated the creation of IDAC, of the International Data Alliance for Children on the Move, which was launched in 2020 to address major data gaps in child-specific migration and displacement statistics, and including unaccompanied and separated children. Those of us working on child rights and migration at the time were watching with real alarm as crises around the world forced so many children from home, many of them traveling alone. And without the protection of a parent or caregiver, they faced very concerning conditions, limited access to school and healthcare, heightened violence, exploitation, and abuse. And the COVID-19 pandemic further intensified these risks. Sudden border closures and travel restrictions made already dangerous journeys even more perilous. At the same time, as statisticians, we recognize that due to very limited reliable information on these children, there was far too little that we knew about them. Many statistical national systems lacked the capacity to identify or track unaccompanied and separated children, making it difficult to plan effective protection measures. And in short, these children were highly vulnerable, in urgent need of protection, and yet largely invisible in the data and evidence. So IDAC was formed to change that invisibility. We work hand in hand with partners around the globe, including origin, transit, and host countries, to strengthen statistical systems and ensure migrant and displaced children are counted and they're visible. And our goal is to equip decision makers with the evidence that they need to design and enact policies that protect and empower all children in migration contexts, including the hardest to reach, such as those traveling without a parent or a caregiver. And as our discussions today will reiterate, the situation of unaccompanied and separated children continues to demand immediate attention and action. Available figures from key mixed movement flows and regional statistics on displaced populations indicate that a concerning number of children are on the move without a parent or caregiver. And we know all too well that rights violations persist in many areas of their lives. But due to ongoing data gaps, there are many questions that we still need to answer, including, at a minimum, how many of them there are, where they come from, and where they're going. And this is essential information to ensure these children receive the protection and support they're entitled to, whether they cross borders or are internally displaced. And as you'll hear today, the knowledge base on unaccompanied and separated children can be strengthened when investments in resources and capacities are matched with strong political will. So today's event is a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for better data, for better lives for every child affected by migration and displacement, whether on their own or not. Thank you very much. So those were Dungeon's opening remarks, which I read on her behalf. Thank you so much. And now let's dive into the key findings and recommendations of this report. So I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Sebastian Palmas, who's a data specialist at UNICEF and who led the literature review and the data analysis for this report. Sebastian, just to say a few words about his background. He's a demographer and has served as a data specialist on migration and displacement within UNICEF's data and analysis team for more than 4 years. His work focuses on quantitative analysis related to children on the move and on providing technical support to IDAC. He has led the analysis for several IDAC publications, including the guidelines on indicators for children on the move and the report on climate mobility and childhood. And as part of a key IDAC work stream, Sebastian also collaborates regularly with UNHCR and IDMC to strengthen methodologies for estimating the number of displaced children. So, Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marzia. So hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Sebastian Palmas. So I'm gonna go with you just a couple of minutes on the contents of the report. Just also to start, and a very important point. This is a very collaborative effort, not only for the 5 members of the Secretariat of IDAC, but also from a lot of partners like Impact Initiative, the Hellenic Statistical Authority, the Mixed Migration Center, the Migration Youth and Children Platform, which we'll hear more a little bit later. So it's really one of the, again, it's a joint work like all other IDAC products. So this is a very which I think makes it especially valuable. This is we reviewed over 200 journal articles, briefs from the UN agencies, European Union institutions, and other non-governmental organizations. But in light of the significant gaps, we also recognize that it's not, it cannot be interpreted as a comprehensive or a very exhaustive literature review, but we do want to highlight how completes in many different aspects this report is. So we're gonna go with just the three of the sections of the report. One of it's the 5 facts about unaccompanied and separated children. So these are 5 facts that we would like to highlight. Like if you want it, if people just want to take just a couple of things from the report, this would be like the key aspects or the key information of the brief. First of all, the number of unaccompanied and separated children on the move it's unknown. There is no comprehensive global figure for unaccompanied and separated children who migrate internationally, who are displaced or seek international protection. So efforts have been made to predict and estimate family separation over the last decades to meet the urgent needs of this population. And just for example, only 48% of countries where UNHCR reports statistics have data on refugee and asylum-seeking children of children traveling alone. Across many migration routes, there is a worrying number of children, but that are traveling without a parent or caregiver. This is the map we produce that we know that it only reflects only a fraction of the real picture. For major corridors like those from Venezuela or Syria, route-specific data are missing, meaning that many children traveling alone are not captured in current evidence. But we know that the scale of the issue is almost certainly larger than what the data reveal. Another key fact, quality data on key dimensions like age, sex remains sparse. Existing data points towards indicates that adolescents consistently make up the majority of children on the move. In countries and regions where data are available, adolescents are the largest proportion by age of the unaccompanied and separated children population, but emerging evidence points to a recent increase in the share of younger. Different context, the EU asylum-seeking numbers, the operational data from Mexico southern border, the arrivals of people of interest to UNHCR in the southern Mediterranean, and operational data from UNICEF. We know that again, so indicates that adolescents consistently make up the majority of children moving alone. Fourth, a key fact, gender plays a major role in how and why children travel alone. Across many regions, boys are far more likely to migrate unaccompanied and to cross international borders. And we also show several examples. For example, between 2014 and 2024, boys made up around 90% of unaccompanied child asylum applicants in the EU and UK, and more than 70% of those encountered at Mexico southern border and Mexico southern border. But patterns vary by context. For example, in Southeast Asia, demands for domestic work drives women and migrant workers are female, and some likely under 18. 5 key facts. So crisis is the number of unaccompanied and separated children. This could be armed conflict, economic stability, disasters, climate, often lead to a sharp rise in the number of migrant and displaced children on their own. And these emergencies force a large number of children to flee alone, either after losing family members or being separated during displacement, or being sent away by parents to protect them from forced recruitment, persecution, or violence. So these are the key facts. By the way, we, along with the report, we publish a short document with only these 5 facts that is also quite useful. Another section of the report is this. We know that unaccompanied and separated children face some of the highest risks of any children on the move. without parent or caregiver. They are more vulnerable to food insecurity, limited access to healthcare, violence, exploitation, and prolonged school interruptions. So, for example, on health, we know that many unaccompanied children arrive with urgent medical needs, such as respiratory infections, malnutrition, or low vaccination coverage. Mental health is also quite significantly higher, and in some studies show that being unaccompanied is one of the strongest prediction of depression and anxiety. On education, these children often face long delays before enrolling in school due to missing documentation or lengthy asylum procedures. And on protection, we know many flee violence only to face further risks along the migration routes. For example, in Central America, 58% of unaccompanied children reported experiencing harm or threats before leaving home. So across all these areas, data gaps remain large. This report highlights the urgent need for stronger systems and to protect these children. First and last, we outlined key challenges underlying the data gaps that we encountered. Data on unaccompanied and separated children remain extremely limited. First, countries use different definitions and methods, but so we need standardized approaches and harmonized indicators in all national statistical systems. Second, the traditional surveys rarely capture children traveling alone because they are designed for households. And to tackle this, it is essential that we develop targeted questions, train frontline workers, and methodologies are tailored to identify unaccompanied children. Third, many children avoid authorities due to fear of deportation and or mistrust of the authorities. So it is key that we all work together to build a trust, and organizations involved in obtaining data build trust through transparent communication and strong data privacy safeguards. Fourth, transit countries also face major gaps because children move quickly and often lack documentation. For this, we need to leverage different types of data, harness innovation. For example, the real-time monitoring really helpful, and early warnings can help track fast changing environments. And last, coordination and unclear responsibilities mean that there is information that is not shared or used effectively. So with this, we need stronger collaboration and data share agreements. And I believe spaces such as these webinars or IDAC can be a start of these efforts. So this is what I wanted to mention. Go and go to the website, read the report. Finally, I would like to mention that Naomi Lin, who is also present, was also a key member of the writing of this report. So thanks to her. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for walking us through the key facts, findings, data gaps, and the report's recommendations also for global action. And just a reminder to all participants to drop your questions in the chat, indicate your and whom you're going to question, use the chat or Q&A function here and using the buttons above. So next, one key point of all of this is that while the numbers are truly alarming, we must never lose sight of the individual lives they represent. And so it is a privilege to hear a first-hand perspective today from Nawar Arouk, who is a member of the Migration Youth and Children platform and whom we are grateful to work closely with at IDAC. So Nawar is a public health professional with lived experience as a former refugee and unaccompanied child, and is now working as a public health strategist in Karlsborg, Sweden. He aspires to support refugees and children on the move directly in the future. Nawar, we're so happy much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Marzia. And thank you for Sebastian for sharing the highlights of the report. I think I want to focus on one thing, one of the key recommendations of the report, which was about building trust. And I can begin with saying that I learned to fear authority long before I ever crossed the border alone. My journey as an unaccompanied and separated child taught me something that sits at the heart of this report, something I would like to emphasize. When you are a child on the move, trust determines everything. Whether you seek help, whether you share your information, and whether you feel safe. I grew up in Syria, where the government was something to fear, not to rely on. And this experience is not unique to me. Among people fleeing conflict or state violence, mistrust of authorities is common and deeply rooted. So when I found myself crossing borders alone to reunite with my family in Sweden, I carried that mistrust with me. Separated from my siblings and terrified of being forced to claim asylum in a country other than Sweden, something that could have kept me apart from my parents for a long time, I flinched at the sight of soldiers or officials, especially at certain borders known among people for being aggressive. Traffickers felt more predictable than official systems. It sounds unbelievable now, but this is how I felt. No person on the move should ever have to feel that way. But this trust is not fixed. It shifts, it breaks, and sometimes it rebuilds. And this is what I want to talk about. Those moments where trust became possible on my journey. I remember seeing Red Cross volunteers offering food, water, and directions at a certain border crossing. I had known this organization from before. I even volunteered with them, and that familiarity mattered. It was enough to make me feel safe to approach them, even to exchange a few words, something that I haven't done in days. Another moment was in a transit camp, when a soldier approached me and spoke not as an authority figure, but as a human being. He shared his story, his struggles and hopes, before asking about mine. That simple act allowed me to trust him enough, not only to tell him about my journey, but also to help him with translation to speak to others. These small gestures changed how I felt. They shaped whether I stepped towards help or withdrew from it. And this is exactly what today's report makes clear. When children cannot trust authorities, they avoid them. They avoid registration, they avoid giving information, and they disappear from the very systems designed to protect them. And when they disappear from the data, they risk disappearing from policy and from practice. Trust is not a soft concept. It's a structural requirement for ethical data collection, for cross-border coordination, and for child protection services that actually work. And trust depends on previous experiences. A child who has only known violent or unpredictable authorities will not suddenly trust a border guard or a caseworker. Trust must be earned. To build that trust, systems must be predictable and transparent. Information must be consistent at borders. And frontline workers must be trained to meet unaccompanied children with dignity and patience. We must remember that every data set begins with a conversation with a child who must feel safe enough to speak or even to identify themselves. Hope and my urgent message is that we use the findings of this report to build systems that children on the move can truly rely on. Systems that recognize the weight of their previous experiences, systems that actively work to earn their trust. Because no child should ever be put in a position where being unseen feels safer than being seen. Thank you.
Nawar, thank you so much for sharing your powerful testimony so candidly and with such openness, and for highlighting the importance of trust and building trust, and how finding that trust was essential to you as a child on the move alone. And so it's a really powerful call to action. And yeah, we're very grateful again to have you with us today. And thanks again for joining us. Now, with this, thank you. With this in mind, we'll now move on to the statistical perspective, again, from the European Union, and I'm very pleased to welcome Piotr Juchno. Piotr works as a team leader in Eurostat's unit on population and migration. He's leading the statistical work in the area of asylum and managed migration and on the subject of migrant integration. He has been working in this area for more than 20 years and contributed to setting international statistical projects, including IDAC and AGRIS. And we're very grateful, Piotr, for your partnership and your key secretariat member of IDAC as well. In his work at Eurostat, he coordinates the statistical developments in this area for the EU, the European Free Trade Association, and EU enlargement countries. And Piotr will tell us a little bit about Eurostat's efforts in addressing data gaps in data on unaccompanied and separated children in the European Union, particularly around those seeking asylum. So, Piotr, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you very much, Marzia. Can you see my slides? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to present this webinar, and that will be indeed quite different from the previous presentation, but I think it's also important to show how we, at least in the European Union, try to react to this evidence need to have evidence to be delivered to the policymakers to make these things happen. So starting, I think, in the context of the European Union, I think it is relatively well covered in the sense that I think the policy need has been recognized, and just in the context of the statistics, what is relevant here is that often in the past the policies were simply made without much of the evidence. This has very much changed when the extent of the migration crisis has come to the level that has been identified that simply much more statistical knowledge about the children, separated children, unaccompanied minors is urgently needed to make this change happen and to address the issues that are related to the needs of this vulnerable group. So, as I said, the crisis in particular, those in 2014-15, also related to the developments in Syria, has led very quickly to the serious considerations that this needs to be addressed by the statistical community in the European Union. And Eurostat, being a statistical office of the European Union, has the role to undertake this initiative. So, in fact, the statistics in the area of international protection, because I think this is probably the starting point here, has been collected since a long time. So in 2007 we had received a legal basis for the data collection in this area, but even before that there were various initiatives that were running, and the statistics were collected in the area of international protection. So we knew about the asylum applicants, we knew about what are the outcomes of that. We had a basic knowledge about the age and sex disaggregations, but for instance, there was very little knowledge or almost no knowledge about the unaccompanied minors. And that was existing. I mean, this phenomena is not new to the recent crisis, but this influx of those such of this group was existent also before. And even in the 2007 regulation, there was a only very tiny point which was allowing us to collect information on asylum applicants and persons being considered as unaccompanied minors. It was, in principle, annual figure broken down by citizenship by age and sex, and that was all what we knew in terms of official statistics in the EU. It wasn't very helpful, surely also for the policymakers. And this has changed, as I said, with the crisis being simply too large to not to undertake the challenge, and that has then led to the revision of the regulation in 2020, and I must say that in fact the main element leading to this amendment was in fact the missing data on unaccompanied minors. As I said, the gaps in the data were so evident that also the policymakers and the countries were supporting this development. So this change in 2020 led to the new data, series of new data requirements. It was not only covering the specific gaps related to the unaccompanied minors. It was covering various types of data in asylum area, in Dublin statistics, that is about those movements, secondary movements of asylum seekers within the EU countries. Also in the law enforcement area, including return statistics, apprehensions of irregularly staying migrants in the EU. There is also a fourth area of residence permits, but it's less relevant in this context. So apart of adding other new elements of data collections for the entire asylum data on international protection, asylum is presented here, we have been finally able to break the data down by the status of minors. That means to see if they're accompanied, unaccompanied. That will, along with the disaggregation by age and sex, was already is delivering quite a complete set of information because it's in principle covers the main steps of the asylum procedure, starting with the asylum applications, going into the first instance decisions, then final decisions, withdrawals. So that was assuring that we had finally, since 2021, as a first reference period, we started to collect very granular data, not just an annual figure, as I said before, but this data were also available at the monthly, quarterly, depending on the data sets. But there was also much higher frequency of the data collection. That was also applicable to the statistics on Dublin, the secondary movements, where we also were able to see if minors were accompanied or unaccompanied. Similarly, for the law enforcement statistics, specifically on return statistics, also here we are able to follow up on a quarterly basis if the returns concern, for instance, unaccompanied minors. Yes. That's one of the elements maybe I will shortly cover later on. And to give you some examples of that, how the data can be actually accessed, because it is maybe not a common knowledge, but basically all the data that we are collecting in Eurostat, they're publicly available, can be accessed in the Eurostat online database. So the statistics I was just referring to here are ready to your use, and I'm also very happy that IDAC is also making use of that, at least in the European context. One very recent development is that the data on temporary protection since the large-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine in 2022. We have been also setting up on voluntary basis a quick data collection, a voluntary data collection on the specific topic on decision on flows and stocks data, and also here, thanks to the previous improvements of the amended legal basis, we were also able to distinguish information on unaccompanied minors, and that was appeared to be extremely useful for the policymakers. So I think that's also one of the major developments, and this data are on monthly and collected since 2022. Then for the asylum statistics, as I was mentioning to you, there is a great variety of data that can be accessed thanks to the amendment from 2022 with the data series starting in 2021. The same applies to the asylum decisions and resettlements. What I should also mention is that, in fact, and that is thanks to the initiative of IDAC, where there was such a strong focus on children in migration, has been identified also in the European context, and we have made a better use of the data. And I think it's also a lesson to be learned for everyone. We have created specific dedicated section, for instance, on children. I mean, as an example, for children in migration, making this easier to access the information in one specific point of entry, so to say, on Eurostat website, where all the information about methodology of the data collection, legal basis, policy context can be found. So that was one of element. The other element, when we use this information, are also online publication, and there is an online publication on children in migration when we analyze the information from the demographic population perspective, but also from the asylum or legal residence perspective. So then other statistics that you can also we are able to collect are the Dublin that I was mentioning before, a lot of data sets specifically on children, unaccompanied minors, and those that I mentioned about the returns. I'm saying, of course, it looks like there is, of course, a rich source of the information, but I think it is surely a great step since 2020 that we have been able to achieve in the European Union. Still, not all the issues are resolved, and these are the data gaps which are still existing at the national level, often linked to the registration systems and the administrative systems at the national level. They are not serious, but still there are punctual system gaps. Then, in the context of the EU, where usually certain policy areas are well harmonized by the European law, migration policy is not necessarily the case, and this leads to the fact that there are some varying practices, administrative practices, and this hinders the data comparability. To give you an example, for instance, temporary protection data on unaccompanied minors, we have a situation that, for instance, in Poland, those children are hard to actually track because administration, the national administration in that country, very quickly assigns a legal guardian to the to such an unaccompanied minor, which of course is very, very useful. But then for the statistical context, it is making this then hard to identify, because in this the statistics is not able to capture that, since they are no longer considered unaccompanied minors in that country. Then, for instance, another example in residence permits, where, for instance, a country like France is not issuing specific residence permits to the children, and this hinders proper coverage of the legal stay of children in that country, because we have simply missing information on that. Then, so for some of the data, I was giving an example of return statistics. We often come to the simple disclosure control issues where the data are relatively so low that it's hard to disseminate because we talk about very low figures, while we yes, there is still a high interest in the data collection. I think this lessons here, it is more also, I hope it can be used also in the other contexts for the other countries or regions in the world to how this issue of the existing data gaps in this area can be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Piotr, for providing this regional perspective, the efforts at the EU level to enhance data on unaccompanied separated children. Particularly interesting the point you highlighted about the importance of legal mandates and political will really to build inclusive statistical systems and ensuring, for instance, better data disaggregation by migratory status of the child. So thank you so much for that, despite all the challenges, of course. Our next speaker, and we'll move on quite quickly as time is running very fast. So we're glad to welcome our colleague Laurent Chapuis, who's a senior child protection specialist in the Child Protection and Humanitarian Action at UNICEF headquarters in New York. Laurent provides programmatic global leadership, supporting UNICEF country and regional offices, work with unaccompanied and separated children, and case management in humanitarian situations, including situations of conflict, natural disasters, and public health crisis. And earlier he focused also on migration in Europe and Central Asia region. And so Laurent will provide the programmatic perspective, focusing on particularly on how data impacts protection efforts on the ground. We hope you can connect now, Laurent. We had some connectivity issues before the webinar. And so thank you so much also for all your contributions and substantive contributions during the preparation of this report. So with that, over to you, Laurent. I hope you can hear us and you can speak now.
Thank you, Marzia. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
And can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much having me. I want to acknowledge Nawar's words that I found very, very powerful. So Nawar, thanks a lot for bringing this perspective. I think it should never be forgotten. Also acknowledging my colleagues, Danzen, Marzia, Sebastian's efforts putting this report together. From a programmatic viewpoint, it is very important we shed the light you are shedding on this issue. So much appreciated. Indeed, I thought I would share a few views, thoughts about programming for unaccompanied separated children. The reason being that I guess we would all agree we never collect data for the sake of collecting data. From a programming viewpoint, data is super important, super powerful in the sense that it is contributing to preventing separation in the first place. It is helping with the response. It is helping strengthening systems, not only data systems, but broader child protection, asylum systems, as we've just heard. And from an advocacy viewpoint, we know how powerful data is when it comes to raising resources and advocating for adequate policy and legal reform. So this is a little bit the perspective I'd like to share when it comes to UNICEF and programming for unaccompanied separated children. I can see my slide. Oh yeah. Just sharing this with you because I'd like to put programming for unaccompanied separated children in a broader perspective. We never program for UASCs on their own. We respond to humanitarian situations through different interventions. Some are population-based, reaching big numbers, and building on that, we identify the most vulnerable children who do require individual attention, such as child protection case management. It is very often through such interventions that we identify, meaning we, UNICEF and our partners, obviously, including government, including other UN agencies. Happy to see we have IOM and UNHCR on board here, that we identify the most vulnerable children requiring individual attention, including unaccompanied separated children. but this is never implemented in isolation from other interventions. In terms of background, we really see unaccompanied separated children as being at the core of the population requiring this individualized, specialized attention. For UNICEF, family separation, unaccompanied separated children is one of the core commitment of the organization in humanitarian settings. I want to say this is a little bit from this issue that the entire programmatic area, child protection in humanitarian action, was designed, if you want. This was one of the first vulnerabilities identified in contexts like Vietnam, like Cambodia, in the Thai camps, Rwanda, Sierra Leone. This is how the international community realized how vulnerable the children separated from their families were, and on that basis, how much needed it was to design specific interventions to respond to their needs. We have invested in trying to get useful estimates for programmatic and advocacy purposes. On that basis, doing desk reviews, analyzing data sets over the years, we generally estimate that about 1% of any displaced population is made of unaccompanied separated children, acknowledging that not all of them will need case management, alternative care, family tracing, and reunification. In fact, what we observe is that in many crises, unaccompanied separated children are spontaneously looked after by households from their own communities. And this is surely not something programming should discourage. On the contrary, this is something we should build upon while being ready to identify those that are truly unaccompanied, or even amongst those that are separated, those that might need to be placed elsewhere because of the specific conditions they are in. We've also been able to, looking at a very large data sets, over 350,000 households, we've been able to assess that roughly 10% of any displaced households is caring for a non-biological child. Again, confirming this gut feeling, if you want, that spontaneously communities do look after unaccompanied separated children around them. UNICEF programming in that respect. So we like to refer to the three pillars of our interventions. We talk about prevention, so preventing family separation in the first place. This is very often achieved through cross-sectoral engagement, reaching out to the education sector, the health sector, but also social policy, appreciating that social policy, social protection measures can help mitigate, reduce the risk of family separation in the first place. The importance of conducting research to understand the dynamics around family separation, and working on behavior change. I was talking about spontaneous foster care or kinship care as being something to encourage. The second pillar, this is often the most visible one. This is about response. So identifying unaccompanied separated children, providing individual case management, if and where needed, conducting family tracing and reunification, assessing whether it is in the best interest of the child to be reunified. So often it is, it's not always the case. And in the meantime, providing alternative care, either on the short term or the longer term, if and when reunification is deemed to be not in the child's best interest. The third piece, and maybe this is where this discussion on data comes in. The third piece is about strengthening systems. We try, as you know, we all refer to nexus programming. So yes, it is important to respond, but it is also important to leave something behind and ensure that we strengthen national capacity to prevent and respond. And this is done through strengthening the social service workforce as social workers, parasocial workers, Asylum officials are very often on the front line, and they are the ones who will be in direct contact with unaccompanied separated children. Nawar referred to the trust building with unaccompanied separated children. This is at that level that trust needs to happen. But system strengthening is also about strengthening data systems and alternative care policy reform. UNICEF, so what is UNICEF doing on this front? Well, in 2024, we had 67 countries reporting working with and for unaccompanied separated children. We've reached over 120,000 children, providing them either with alternative care only or alternative care and family reunification where it was feasible. And we have a larger cohort of children who benefited from individual case management, many of them being unaccompanied separated children. At global level, so we see it's interesting to listen to data colleagues, because from a programmatic viewpoint, our views is that very often data on unaccompanied and separated children is actually coming from the workforce that delivers services. Yeah, this is through system service delivery that we do identify or not unaccompanied separated children. This is why we as a sector have invested so much in social service workforce skills and knowledge around the issue, working on data categorization, so coming up with definitions shared across the sector. And here I would like to remind ourselves that UNICEF is the provider of last resort when it comes to child protection in humanitarian action, highlighting our unique responsibility vis-à-vis those kids, but also that there are minimum standards in child protection, like the SPHERE standards. You have the equivalent in child protection. It's called CPMS, Child Protection Minimum Standards. The Alliance for CPHA is the custodian of those standards. All agencies programming are members of this alliance and therefore accountable to apply and roll out those standards when it comes to data categorization, but also when it comes to using forms, setting up information management systems through digital platforms, applying standard operating procedures and referral pathways. Again, I want to stress, when we identify unaccompanied separated children, this is not for the sake of identifying them. This is to work with them on a durable solution. Can we look at reunifying them with their families? Can we look at alternative solutions where this is not feasible? Hence, the importance of referral pathways. When it comes to, I saw a number of points on data protection, information sharing protocols. Here as well, the sector has gone a long way, proposing templates for actors at country level, especially in programming countries, to ensure that they have the right protocols to allow for data protection and information sharing. Again, not for the sake of it, but to support service provision. There are also partnerships with HER and IOM on the issues through a system strengthening approach. And I mentioned the alliance and maybe the role of the cluster system, which is being reformed, but that is going to remain instrumental in advancing those standards. Just want to conclude by stressing again that for us, it is important we remind ourselves of why is it we want to improve data. It's not for the sake of having good data. It should be in order to feed and support prevention, response, system strengthening, and mobilizing adequate resources for that purpose, while acknowledging there are a number of standards, a number of products that are waiting for our support and in order to be rolled out to improve some of and address some of the challenges that colleagues have shared just before me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurent, for those great points. Just wanted, conscious of time, moving on very quickly to our last speaker of today. And we hope you can stay on for a few more minutes since we started a few minutes late as well. I'm very pleased to introduce Jennifer Potko, who's the Chief of Global Policy and Advocacy at Kids in Need of Defense Kind. She's an international human rights lawyer, an expert on child migration in the United States, and she manages the Kinds organization KIND's advocacy work for advanced laws, policies, and practice to advanced laws, policies, and practices at the local, national, and global level to ensure that migrant children are protected throughout their journeys to safety. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us and for your patience until now. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for sticking on for a few more minutes. I will try to be brief, but I also want to give a big thank you to IDAC for this new important brief and inviting us to participate in your launch today. For those who are not familiar with my organization, Kids in Need of Defense is an international non-governmental organization devoted to the protection of unaccompanied and separated children. It was founded in 2008 by the Microsoft Corporation and Angelina Jolie to address the gap in legal services for unaccompanied children. Today, we have staff around the United States, Mexico, Central America, and throughout Europe. We collaborate with pro bono attorneys, non-governmental partners to provide unaccompanied children with child-centered, trauma-informed, holistic care that includes both legal representation and psychosocial support. In 2024, globally, we served over 26,000 unaccompanied and separated children and their families with direct legal and psychosocial services. So through our direct work every year with direct work with children, we see firsthand how policies and practices end up marginalizing and discriminating against them, leaving them vulnerable to heightened risk of trafficking, exploitation, and other abuses. And this is because, as expertly explained already and by this IDAC report, unaccompanied and separated children are often invisible to the state authorities who are entrusted to protect them. So this, though, is the lack of child-centered laws and policies. So when children are afraid of being detected, detained, or separated from their families when presenting themselves to state officials, when they're scared that their data will be used to target their families or their loved ones for deportation or other adverse immigration actions, they will logically seek to avoid being identified. So this not only hinders our ability to collect and publish accurate data, but it puts them at greater risk. And additionally, if a state does not have the necessary resources to serve this population, for example, a well-resourced child protection agency or staff who are expert in working with children on the move, there's a disincentive for the state to even identify these children who are journeying on their own. And unfortunately, recent harmful policy changes globally have made it even harder to identify this population. A few examples is right now the United States is using children as bait to conduct immigration enforcement or criminally prosecute family members. In the United Kingdom, access to asylum and protection is even more difficult and much more temporary. There are elements of the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum, which normalize restrictive border procedures that includes intrusive screening and even detention of children. So what is the role of data in strengthening the protection of unaccompanied and separated children on the move? As we've heard before, doing a better job of collecting the disaggregated data on unaccompanied and separated children is not an end in itself. Right? It doesn't necessarily equal greater protection just because we know more about them. What's important is that the data collection is undertaken with the purpose and intent of ensuring safety and well-being of children. Right? There's clear examples of data being weaponized against children. For example, in the United States, they were doing a great job tracking the arrival of unaccompanied and separated children at the US-Mexico border, but then that data was used to call a border crisis and close access to protection for anyone entering through the US-Mexico border. So what types of data can civil society provide or benefit from to protect UCs? For civil society organizations like KIND, having information about age, sex, point of entry, whether a child is unaccompanied or unaccompanied, and when they became separated or unaccompanied is crucial for us to scale the responses necessary and target our very limited resources effectively to make sure that we can respond to the needs and the locations where children are. Let me give you a few examples. In the past recent years, we saw emergency in large numbers of traversing through the Darien Gap in Panama and in Latin America. And when this was initially happening, people asked KIND if we would go and we would support children. We were looking for research. We were trying to identify how many children were traversing the Darien Gap, what were their needs. And the initial reports were there are no children going through the Darien Gap. Well, that's of course impossible. If there's such large numbers of people going, of course there are going to be children who are traveling on their own. We ended up conducting our own missions, conducting our own research, targeted for this population, asking specific questions to make sure that we understood what was the need and was it important for an organization like KIND to provide services to the children. The other thing I want to say is qualitative data, of course, is important. But hearing from the children themselves and young people themselves about what they need is just, if not more, important. For example, we created a client expert project, having our clients give us information about what they believe are the most important policy changes and what are the things that children themselves need. Hearing from them, the children themselves and the young people themselves is crucial for us to make sure that we're meeting the actual need and not just what we may perceive as needs of children. So making sure that children have a voice in all of this research is crucial. Making sure that children have access to child-friendly legal information, advice, and representation so that they can make decisions about what is going to be in their best interest is crucial. Making sure that we have collaborative partnerships and safe spaces so that we can not only gather information, but make sure children are getting the information that they need themselves. And of course, having safe and regular pathways so that children on the move can make sure that they are in a place of safety and that they can be reunified with safety and have the supports they need. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for keeping it brief, but also for the very powerful remarks and great points as well. Unfortunately, we have no time for Q&A, and I take that as my responsibility. So apologies to all of you, but I saw some questions were already addressed in the chat, in the Q&A, but please feel free to send us any questions, comments, feedback you may have at idac@unicef.org. And we hope that this report and discussion will be useful in your own work to better protect and support unaccompanied and separated children globally. A huge thank you to our excellent speakers, Sebastian, Piotr, Nawar, Laurent, Jennifer, to all of you for participating and for your engagement. Please follow our LinkedIn page, subscribe to the mailing list so you can keep up to date as well on upcoming events and publications. We would need another half hour at least to discuss this. So that's a lesson learned also for upcoming events and future events. But we will be posting a webinar recap on the IDAC website, dataforchildrenonthemove.org, and on the IDAC YouTube channel as well. And thank you all so much again for taking the time. And since we're approaching the holiday period, wishing everyone a peaceful and joyful holiday time, and see you all soon in IDAC's upcoming events in 2026. So thank you all. Goodbye.